Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Today we're back here with Extra History. Today we got some U.S. history, this time with part 1 of the William McKinley series. First up, the Tariff King. So yeah, I guess we're going to the financial policies of Mr. McKinley. I'm actually curious because he's kind of an unknown one if you skip through the presidents. So I don't know much about the guy. Kind of curious now, so let's check it out. Be sure to subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Here we go.
Buffalo, New York, September 5th,
NYC.
1901.
Just that way.
In what seems like a miracle, electric lights illuminate the soaring buildings of the Pan American Exposition. This is a World's Fair, one celebrating the continent that appears poised to make the 20th century the American century, and speaking is the man who made that
McKinley.
happen. President William McKinley squints into the lights, giving the best speech of his life, one that, ironically, repudiates the protectionism and tariff policies that catapulted him to political office in the first place.
The period of exclusiveness is past. The expansion of our trade and commerce is the pressing problem. Commercial wars are unprofitable. A policy of goodwill and friendly trade relations will prevent reprisals. Reciprocity
Only
treaties
got that
are in
lately.
harmony with the
That's not
spirit of the times. Measures of retaliation are not.
He is arguing to end insularity and promote American free trade to the world. And that is fitting since his presidency has made the United States a global power. Yet out in the darkness is another man with a revolver in his pocket. A man who in less than 24 hours will kill an American president.
Ooh. Later. I think he's assassin. Not good.
This first part of our historical tale is brought to you by Nebula, but more on them and how you can see the second chapter of this McKinley series before anyone else after the episode.
There are 3 parts.
William McKinley has been called the architect of the American century. During his presidency, he led the United States through a transformation from a relatively insular nation to an outward-looking one, engaged in global trade, and was able to project power across the globe. He won a massively successful war, added to the country's first colonial possessions, and wrestled with running a modern economy.
Right?
However, today, he's mostly known for having been assassinated, paving the way for his much flashier successor, Theodore Roosevelt. Now, McKinley is often called a forgotten president, but that's not really true. For instance, while he may not be well remembered nationally, he's revered in his burial place of Canton, Ohio, where he's looked on as almost a slain martyr. He's also remembered outside the continental US, though much less fondly. In the Philippines, he's seen as supporting the struggle for independence before betraying it in favor of colonial domination. In China, there are museums dedicated to the looting carried out by US Marines who, sent by McKinley, sacked the Imperial Summer Palace during the Boxer Rebellion. And in Rob's hometown of Honolulu, McKinley's role in annexing Hawaii is still controversial enough that there have been multiple attempts to rename a high school christened in his honor and remove a statue of him from the grounds. Which is all really interesting in its contrast, because by all accounts, it was hard to dislike McKinley personally. He was amiable, friendly, rarely had a cross word for anyone, and was an unusually devoted husband for the time. In short, he was a nice guy whose policy decisions resulted in terrible things, often halfway around the globe. But that kind of international reach was unimaginable when McKinley was born in January of 1843. The 7th child out of 9, raised in a strict Methodist household. He received a good education and had some college by the time the Civil War broke out in 1861. And McKinley, raised in an abolitionist household, put his mother's protestations aside and joined up as a private at the age of 18. And he'd end the war having gained 4 significant things: a brevet promotion to major, a friendship with the future President Rutherford B. Hayes, a deep appreciation for the horrors of war, and a reputation for unbelievable bravery. McKinley largely served as a commissary officer, delivering food, ammunition, and messages to the front line, often under heavy fire. He participated in 11 battles, including Antietam, which at nearly 23,000 casualties still ranks as the bloodiest day of combat in US history. And in those engagements, he became famous for taking assignments that were considered suicide missions. More than once, Hayes dispatched him with a wagon of supplies, not believing he'd return, and he once had his horse shot out from under him. McKinley was
Jeez.
justly proud of his.
Wow. Okay. I'm starting to see. Man, this dude's got a lot of luck. Think about it. Civil War. Not only that, but they freaking survived the Battle of Antietam. One of the bloodiest battles in American history. Holy crap. Even Hayes was like, how the hell are you still alive? I mean, honestly, if I was his superior, I'd be like, what the heck are you still alive, Private? Jeez. I mean, boy. Jeez, those bloody 4 years. I mean, I know there's a lot of, glory to World War I and World War II stuff, but back then, I'm pretty sure if you told someone you were, you fought in the Civil War through all 4 years, dude, you would get the world. No wonder he became president. You gotta admit, there is just I don't know, the whole idea. I don't know. I mean, you gotta admit, there's gotta been some sorry, I'm trying to put the right words to it, but you gotta admit, you gotta get some respect for the guy, Anyway.
His service, and even once president, preferred to be called the Major. After the war, he returned to Ohio and began building a life for himself, studying law and opening a lucrative legal practice in the growing manufacturing hub of Canton. And from there, it didn't take him long to step into local politics. In 1867, his old commander Rutherford B. Hayes ran for governor on the Republican ticket, and McKinley stumped for him, helping Hayes win a highly polarized district. McKinley's talent for politics was clear enough that he ran for prosecutor in the same district 2 years later, managing a surprise win for an office that had been long held by Democrats. Granted, he was ousted 2 years later, but it showed promise. Now, as McKinley and his legal partner were cleaning up financially, he decided he wanted to embark on a new partnership, this time a personal one. Walking to his Methodist church to teach Sunday school, McKinley kept passing a woman walking the other way to teach Sunday school at the Presbyterian church, Ida Saxton. She was a member of a prominent family who, at the time, were unusual in their support of equal education for women. Ida had attended boarding school and a finishing school, then controversially had taken a job as a clerk at her father's bank before touring Europe. One day, he passed her a note suggesting that they walk together, and after a year of courtship, they married in January of 1871, embarking on what promised to be an idyllic family life. They had a daughter, Katie, quickly got pregnant again, but then everything started going wrong. Ida's mother passed away, and at the funeral, Ida fell from a carriage and sustained a head injury. Then their second daughter died a few months after birth, and Ida entered a deep depression, which only deepened when less than 2 years later, their remaining daughter, Katie, died at age 4. Ida then began suffering epileptic seizures, possibly due to the head injury, and William stepped in as her caregiver, staying physically close to her as much as possible for the rest of their lives. However, she insisted that he not give up his political ambitions. And McKinley's political star was rising. After defending 21 striking miners charged with rioting and getting all but one off, McKinley suddenly found himself both with working-class political support and a new ally in Mark Hanna, a Republican Party kingmaker. Ironically, Hanna had been one of the mine owners in the dispute, but put that aside when he saw the young lawyer's potential. McKinley ran for the House of Representatives in the 1876 election, while supporting his mentor Hayes for president that same year. The presidential election ended up too close to call, and Hayes only took office once the Republicans struck the Compromise of 1876, agreeing to end Reconstruction in the South in exchange for taking the presidency. And oh boy, does that deserve an episode one day. So we mark it down, you know the drill. Who knew there was this much history? McKinley, though, he won his election handily. And his greatest policy? Protectionism. In McKinley's mind, America's rapidly expanding manufacturing and agricultural sectors needed to be shielded from having their prices undercut by the more established manufacturers in Europe. Now, the United States had already levied tariffs on imports, which is how it raised revenue before the national income tax and had paid off its debts from the Civil War. In fact, the U.S. was in such good financial position due to collecting tariffs and controlling spending that by the time McKinley was in Congress, it was running on a budget surplus. Though, keep in mind, the US also provided little to no social services and had a relatively small military. Over the next 14 years, he'd serve Ohio in the House of Representatives, becoming the Republicans' main advocate for tariffs, while trying to remain moderate on other domestic issues like currency. He was popular, and at one point, when Democrats redistricted his seat, causing him to lose re-election, he managed to get elected again in the next cycle. And through it all, he made protectionism his hallmark. "I am a tariff man," he'd say, standing on a tariff platform. By 1889,
I'm a tariff man on a tariff platform. Sorry. The way he said that, I'm just like, wow. Starting to see the Tariff King in there. Which, I mean, considering those are helping with a surplus, I can't blame him. I mean, it is nice. You gotta give him credit, right? Anyway, moving on.
He was one of the most prominent Republican members of Congress, an incredibly distinguished and stately man who was often said to look like Napoleon, a resemblance, it should be said, that political cartoonists of the day put to wicked use. But it was in that year that McKinley was made chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, where he could help steer his pet project, a bill called the McKinley Tariff. The final legislation was not exactly what McKinley had envisioned. It had hundreds of amendments. In fact, it actually removed tariffs on a number of goods the US did not produce, like sugar, molasses, tea, and coffee. No sense in tariffing things you can't produce domestically, right? Right? Because that would make no sense, right? You might as well start asking ChatGPT to tariff some penguins and destroy my retirement account. Anyway, it also raised tariffs on things like wool and tin plate, industries that were still developing in the US. Tin plate, in particular, was targeted. These were plates of thin steel lined with tin to prevent rusting, used in cheap pots and pans, roof tiles, and the manufacture of tin cans and boxes. Most of the tin plate bought in the US was manufactured in the UK, at least until the McKinley tariff nearly destroyed the UK tin plate industry overnight when the tariff went from 30% to 70%.
70?
Ironically, many Cornish and Welsh tin plate workers who lost their jobs due to the McKinley tariff ended up immigrating to the United States. Similar rates were raised on imported wool from the UK. So, did the McKinley tariffs work? Well, kinda. It sped up the domestic manufacture of tin plate a bit, but at the cost of massive and immediate price increases for Americans across a whole range of goods. And y'all, people hated it. In fact, they hated it so much that in the 1890 election, it was a bloodbath for Republicans in the House of Representatives, where they went from 171 seats to 88. McKinley himself lost, albeit narrowly and partially due to gerrymandering. Yet he still remained popular in Ohio and was easily elected governor in the next cycle, but that was just a springboard. Republican President Benjamin Harrison was unpopular, and though McKinley supported him in the 1892 election, it was common knowledge that McKinley was building alliances to make his own run in 1896. And as it happened, Harrison lost, which might have been lucky for the Republicans, because that meant the Democrats took the heat for the Panic of 1893, a financial crisis that would be the worst in American history until the Great Depression. There were a lot of causes, of course. A collapse in grain prices, a railway bubble, a bill that caused the Treasury to buy large amounts of silver, and a run on gold due to a bank failure in Argentina. But one factor were the McKinley tariffs. And who would reap the benefit of the Democrats being blamed? William McKinley, who entered the race for the presidency in the 1896 election. But he would have to work for it, because his Democratic opponent was William Jennings Bryan, a young, popular orator who went on a whistle-stop tour of the country, sometimes delivering as many as 34 speeches in a day. He rallied against the Republicans and their big business cronies, and advocated for, quote, free silver, an idea that mining interests should increase the money supply by directly striking silver coins without government control. This would cause inflation, but he argued that would benefit American producers by increasing the money supply. McKinley, on the other hand, was a gold bug. While he was interested in mixing
Gold bug, huh?
some silver into the reserve, he wanted to keep America on the gold standard to keep things stable and avoid inflation. Early on, Bryan looked like he'd sweep Election Day. McKinley, now 53, couldn't keep up with Bryan's energy and was nowhere near as good a speaker. So
what happened?
why try to play the same game? Instead, he launched the first Front Porch campaign, making it known that he would receive visitors at his home in Canton for 6 days a week. People would come to him, making use of America's now vast rail network. And come they did. Delegations of men visiting from counties across the United States. Interested groups, even all-women delegations came, promising to lobby their husbands to vote McKinley. It all happened in a genial party atmosphere, and by the end of the campaign, over 750,000 people had made the pilgrimage. McKinley also engaged big business, which feared Bryan and his populist policies. Railroads backed McKinley by offering discounted tickets to his Canton home. Factories told workers and suppliers they would have to shut down or cancel orders if Bryan was elected. And some employers even threatened layoffs and put campaign literature into pay envelopes. Oh, and the tycoons also gave money, donating $3.5 million to McKinley's campaign, 7 times what Bryan had received, and possibly more than the total of all previous campaign contributions in American history. I'm sure that won't snowball into something destructive in years to come. That money went into a blizzard of campaign materials, from posters to little gold bug buttons. Oh yeah, that's right. McKinley's 1896 campaign invented the campaign button as well as the direct mailer, because you might have to go to McKinley's porch to see him, but he was also in your mailbox as well. This has actually been called America's first modern political campaign. And come election night, McKinley crushed Bryan in the Electoral College, though the popular vote was uncomfortably close. McKinley's economic argument had propelled him to the White House. Yet, ironically, his presidency would be dominated not by questions of protectionism, but of imperialism. For as we'll see next week, trouble was brewing in the Caribbean, and McKinley, who was skeptical of wars and expressed little interest in overseas territories, was about to plunge headlong into the Spanish-American War. But y'all there?
Yeah, though something tells me that, I don't know, sorry, I'm just like, something tells me he was reluctant to go, but I guess he saw something in there, but I guess we'll have to wait till next time. Let me know what you guys think. Till next time, adios.